Welcome back, CSC230 W1 to ex7 Jumbotron layout. We're working through our CSS. This is part 7 that we're doing right now, and we probably have a lot more to do, but we're making some headway here. We worked on our navigation up at the top. We worked on our button, and we're just gonna kind of edit these buttons down here and make them a little nicer. We're gonna get our picture in here and make this area look a little bit nicer, and then we're gonna focus on our columns and our footer, and then we should be pretty good until we think about our responsiveness. That's a whole other area when we make this smaller and what's gonna happen when we get to this point. So that's our responsiveness, but we're gonna deal with that last. We want this to look good this way first. So we're just gonna adjust our button. So we left off with doing this button class for that orange button. We made a button class called button welcome, and we also created a hover state where we put a transition, we put a different color, we switched the color of the, well, we didn't switch the color of the text. Actually, I don't even need this color. If the color's staying the same, I don't think we need to change that. Let me just refresh this and make sure that's okay. So we didn't change the color of the text, so I don't need the text being there twice. So we're only changing the things that changed. We made a darker orange here. And we're going to do a similar kind of thing with the other buttons. Now let's look at the other buttons. The other buttons are in here, and they're just called button. They have no classes. Now we might want to give them a class called call button or something like that. I'll call it btn class equals and put it in quotes. That's how we create a class. We put it in quotes, and we'll call the class btn dash call because they're the buttons inside the columns. And the other one, we called it button welcome because it's the button inside the welcome. We could have called it button banner, but I'll call it button welcome because that makes sense. And this is called button call. And they're all going to have this class. They'll all be the same. So I'll copy this and I'll just paste it over this tag, this opening tag. Because remember, the class goes in the opening tag. And that's it. Now we don't have any class details for that yet, for button call, but we will. Now where we'll do that will be inside our style sheet. We'll go back to styles.css, and this will be inside main because that's where our columns are. And I'll even put columns here just so I know this is columns. And I don't have any main properties for main yet in general, but we will. But for now, I'm going to put in the button dash call, and we'll kind of look at these. We could even borrow these things. Borrow all of them and put them in there and then see what we want to do. I'll put them in here. Now we don't want the background color orange. We want the background color white to start. And it looks like it's white to start with a border, and then it's going to be gray on the hover. So we'll do that. So it's white to start. That should be easy. We'll just backspace this and just put white, and we can just use that name. Border, we are going to have a border. And remember, for the buttons, when they have border, we just use the regular border properties. Now there's no border here, it's none, but when you see things with border properties, they're just going to have those 3 properties in here, or 3 values in the border property. The thickness, the solid, and we're only going to go with solid unless you want a dotted line or something, and then the color. So that's all we need, those properties. So I'm going to go back there and put in border, and I'll just put solid first. I don't think that properties matter the order. I'll make it solid. I'll make it gray. I'll just see what gray looks like, and I'll make the thickness like 1.5 px and see how that looks for now. And that'll be for button call, and I think I can go check it out. Well, let me check this other stuff first. 8 pix border radius, 110% font size. I'm not sure if we'll need to change that or not. Padding will probably be less, so let me put this at 0.4. And remember, we can put top and bottom and left and right. So if you want a wider button, you can put a smaller padding for one value and then a wider and then a bigger value for the second, so they'll be wider. But let me just put 0.4 in here and see what this looks like to start. Now, I didn't do a hover yet, but let's check this out. And there they are. And obviously the color of the text in there needs to be black because it looks like we have this color of white. Actually, we don't even need this. If we take that out, it will default to black. So let me take that out. And then I think it should be okay. All right, that doesn't look too bad. Looks a little big. I don't think they need to be that big. Let me just comment this out. And before I remove it or change it and see what it looks like. And it could be a little bigger, I guess. Somehow the 110 looked too big, so I'm going to uncomment it. Remember, you could just highlight it and do the same thing, Command question mark or Control question mark if you're on Windows. And I'll just try 105 and see how that looks. 105%. And again, that's not too bad. I think that's all right for now. And you know, I don't want it too small. That looks okay. And we need the border probably a little thicker. Actually, I'm not seeing the, let me try this here. It doesn't look like it's getting that thickness when we see it. So maybe I do need to put the color first. I didn't think I need the color first. And refresh it. Oh, no, that's okay. So that's okay. The gray looks good. We're just going to make it so that it gets like a light gray when you hover over it, and that's all we'll do. So again, for the hover, if remember we go up here, here's hover. We can use the same thing. So I'll use a background color and a transition, and I'll copy that stuff. Now I'm going to make a button call hover here. So I'll do button dash call. I'll put in my curly braces, and remember it's going to be colon hover. So that's that hover state, and then in here I'll hit tab and I'll paste that, and I'll just do like a gray. So I'll get rid of this and see if I find a light gray. There's probably a light gray. And you could do a light orange, or you could find anything, a peach color, maybe peach puff instead of gray. Well, I'll see what light gray looks like first. I'll run that, and I'll go here, and we'll see what the hover looks like. And that's not bad. That's fine. It's different than that, although they still look a little big. Actually, I'm not sure what's happening. I have to check what's happening with the font size here. I'm going to take away the padding just a little, make it 0.3, and maybe make this 102 or something. It seems like even 100. I don't know if it's overriding the 110% or what's happening with that, but let me leave it at 100 and see what happens. It still looks like the text is bigger. That looks okay. I'll leave it like that for now. Even this one, remember this one, if you want this wider, the see more here, if you want it wider, I can go up here to this button welcome, and I have just padding 6 all around, but if you just wanted 6 on the top and bottom, and then you wanted more on the right and left, I could put like 0.8 em, and that would be right and left. This would be top and bottom, that would be right and left. And I'll see if that makes that one look a little better. Could go more. I'll just make it 1 em. And I like that. It's a bigger button now, that's fine. It's funny how that text seems a lot bigger. I'm going to go one more time. I'm going to go here for this button, for the button call, and I'm going to put it at like 90 and see how that looks, because there must be something cascading of the font size right now, that it's not just doing whatever it was initially. So let me see if 90% looks better. Yeah, I think that looks better, to be honest. And I would almost go with a little more padding. It's 0.3. I'll put 0.4 back, and that looks good. I'm happy with that. And remember, we don't have to center align it. Its default alignment is left. But because we have equal padding around, it stays centered. So we don't have to center it. But if you had a really long button or something, then you might have to line it right, left, or centered or something. But right now, the padding is what's centering it. Even padding is centering the same amount of space all around. So that looks okay. That looks fine. We're good. So we're good with that. We're good with the button. That looks okay down there. You know, we could certainly adjust the headings and all that. I'll deal with that later. But let's jump in here and deal with this. And let's get a picture in there. Now, I didn't want to do this whole thing, but we can do it. Let's just go look for something for a background. Now, I was kind of dealing with fall leaves or something. And let me go over here and just put fall leaves. Just find a good wide picture. And I'll go into images. And we'll do this real quick. Fall leaves, and you know, there's all kinds of leaves here. Here's some oak leaves. I use something like this, and you could use anything. I'll try to use something different. Here's kind of, you know, brown ones here or whatever. Now, how big is this? 552. That's pretty small. This is, I'll hover over that 1060. Now, what we want to use, a typical background is like 1280, and I think I did it at like 1280 by 360. So what I'm going to do, we'll go, I have all these tabs open here, but I'm going to go to Photopea, because I think that's pretty easy to use. Hopefully you agree with me. Photopea. And I'm going to make a new background, and I'm going to give it a size to start. So I'm going to go File, New, and it's already at 1280 by 720 by default. Now I don't want it 720. I'm going to do about half of that, and I think I had it at 360. So I'm going to make my image 1280 by 360, and I'll hit Create, and it'll be blank. And then I could go here to Fall Leaves, and I can right-click, or I'm control-clicking on a laptop, and do Copy Image, and go back to Photopea, and I'll paste it. And now I'll just kind of make it a little bit bigger. Now, if you don't see the handles here, make sure you put on Transform Controls, and I'll just make it a little bit bigger right to the edge, and I can move it up a little, and that looks fine. And one thing you could do if you want to tint it down, I'll turn off Transform Controls now. If you want to tint it down, if it's going to be too contrasty so that you can't read text over it, you can either turn down the opacity, or you can just add a layer. You could go down here at the bottom, hit this new layer icon, and fill it with white by going Edit, Fill, and you could choose foreground color, or you could just choose white. And this would be the same way in Photoshop. I'll just choose white, and I'll hit OK. And it puts a layer that's completely white, and then I could turn down the opacity on that. And that way I can kind of adjust. I could kind of use that as like a little like tissue paper kind of over it. So maybe if I put it like 60%, now I'm not, you know, I'm kind of losing all that nice color, but that's okay. I'll just leave it at 50% now. Maybe I'll go down to 40 or 45. I'll just kind of split the difference. Now that way I can always change it again. Now if you wanted to save this as a PSD to open up again with these layers, you can just download it. You could double click on this, and I'll call it Fall Leaves, and you don't have to put an extension, and it's fallleaves.psd. Now if this may be something where you may want to work with again and put new images in there, if you just go File, Save PSD, it'll download it to your downloads. Oh, normally it goes to your downloads. Wait a minute. File, Save as PSD. Oh, it tells you right where to save it. It used to just download it, I thought. Now it's putting it to my downloads, but you could put it anywhere. You know, you could put it on your desktop. You could make a folder that you're working on. So maybe I'll just put it, I'll put it on my desktop for now. But you could put it anywhere you want. I thought it used to just download it. That's nice. Maybe, I don't know if that's a change or not. So it saved it there. And if you want to export this as a JPEG, all you have to do is go File, Export as JPEG. And this one should just download. And it will. Just go to your downloads. So I have this on my desktop, the PSD, and I have that in my downloads. But I'm going to use my downloads. So I'm going to go to my downloads. And here's my downloads. And there's fallleaves.jpg. And I'm going to go back to replit. Let me close this thing at the bottom. And what I could do is put this in here. Now, you can always make a folder called images. Now, we don't have a lot of images, but usually you're going to keep your images in an images folder. So I'm going to go on ex7. I'm going to add a folder. And I'm just going to call the folder images. You could call it IMG, but I'll just call it images for now. Now, there's my images folder. And I'll go back to my Finder on a Mac, or you know, if you're on Windows, you just open up like your File Explorer. And I'm just going to drag this right into images. So here's the one I just made. And I'll just drag it right into images. And there it is. And just remember, it's in an images folder, so its path will have images in front of it. So there I just uploaded it to there, and we can use it as a background image. So I'm done. I even have the PSD saved in case I want to try anything else, or if I think that's too light or too dark, I could go in here, adjust the opacity, and just make a new JPEG. So that's my Fall Leaves PSD. I'll close it up. And I'll close up Photopea so it's not taking up space. I'll close up this. And that looks pretty close to what I had. And now, instead of CSS buttons, I'll look at backgrounds. Here's CSS backgrounds. And that's where they'll give you some information about background images and multiple backgrounds. And I'm not going to go over everything here. You can repeat it so that it kind of tiles. But really, you're just going to use a CSS property called background image. And that's all you should really need. Background URL, and it'll have the image inside it. And we don't have to put size, we'll keep the size, but instead of no repeat, I think we're going to use something called cover. And you could try different things, contain, cover, you could see what happens. Sometimes it'll stretch it out, sometimes it won't, sometimes it'll crop, but I think cover is going to work the best. And we can look at that in more detail, but let's just get it in there first. So we're going to go back here and put a background image. Now, where is the background image going to be? let's look at our HTML. It's actually going to be the background image of, actually what we want to fill, container actually goes 80% width, but the banner area is the full width because that's where the color is. So wherever the color is, that's where we actually want to put the background image. So let's go to our CSS, and I think we already have something for banner. We do. Here's banner, and we have a background color, and we're going to put a background image. So let's put background, see if image comes up. Background image. And if we put a colon, will it help us at all? Doesn't really help us at all here. I guess we'll just use this one down here at the very bottom, URL. And then we should just have to put the URL in. Now, what the URL is going to be, we'll just type this in ourselves. Now, do we need quotes? No, we don't need quotes, but we have to put the path here. And what it is, I'll stretch this out so I can see the name. It's going to be fallleaves.jpg, but it's going to have the images folder included in there. So I could put images // and then fallleaves.jpg. And that's all we should need. It's still white because I don't have the semicolon. And let's see what that looks like. Run, refresh it, and that looks pretty nice. And I don't know what's going to happen when we resize it right now. It looks like it's just kind of staying in place. Actually, that doesn't look bad. I could leave it like that for now. I think that's fine. We can try some other things and see if it matters. If we put something called cover, background size cover, we could see what that does. But I think right now what's happening, and again, this is my new one, this is my old one, and what was happening with the old one? The old one looks like it's scaling, which I don't know if we have to do that. This looks okay, although I don't know what's going to happen if it gets wider than that. Sometimes I might have to move my window and then stretch it out even wider than the 1218. And you can see it tiles if it gets wider. If it's on a really large screen, it's going to tile. That may not be a problem. And I'll put this back here to make sure it fills up the window the way I had it. But we could see what happens here. I'll do background size, and I'll put cover, and just see what happens. Check out the difference. And I'll refresh, and it's kind of scaling a little bit. That's not bad. I don't mind that. And if it gets bigger, I think it's going to kind of stretch it. Let me just see if I move this over and stretch out this side of it. See, it's scaling it larger and larger. Now, I'm not sure if one really matters because it is grayed down. It's kind of tinted down, so it's not a big issue. Even if it restarts, does it really matter? That's up to you. So I'll leave it on cover for now. It doesn't really matter. I think in this case, you know, either way is fine. So that looks okay. And I'd probably want some of this text a little bigger, welcome a little bigger, maybe pull out a little bit of a color in here. So let me do that quick. I'll go in here. I'll check my HTML, and remember that's the H1 that's inside of banner, and it's also the P that's inside of banner. So if I go back to my styles.css, here's banner, and if I wanted to do the H1 inside of banner, because remember we have H1s all over our page, but I only want the one inside of banner. I'm going to do banner, and you could do this, which means direct child. You can do H1. Or you could do a space. It won't matter in this case. And I'll put my curly braces. And what I'll do with that is I'll just give it a color. Maybe I'll make it a little bit bigger. And maybe put a little space underneath it. So I'll give it a color. And I'll just make it dark red for now. Just to see what that looks like. I could always adjust it. I'll put font size. And I'll try 3M. I think that's what I did it before. But let me just try that. Let me try 2M. It may not matter because remember H1s are bigger than our regular text. They're kind of on a different size scale. So 2M might not change anything, but let's see what happens here. And it did nothing. Banner H1, dark red. Why didn't it change anything? Let me try that again. Didn't change anything. Let me try H1 inside of banner and see if that fixes anything. Okay, now that worked. Now, why didn't that work? Is it a direct child? I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Banner, and that's why. Actually, it's good that happened because notice H1 is not a direct descendant of banner. It's kind of a grandchild. It's not a child. And when I use that arrow it means child. And the only child is container. So that's why sometimes we may use that arrow and sometimes we don't. It's not a direct child of banner. It's actually once removed or grandchild. So that's why we're going to use inside. And maybe it's good that happened. Now we see the difference. If you ever wondered what the difference of using that, it's the child of that. And if it's not a child, then it doesn't affect it. And that's usually helpful if you have divs inside of divs inside of divs. It tells you to use the closest one. So we're just using the H1 inside of banner. That works. The size, I wasn't even looking at size. I could go bigger and, you know, maybe like 2.5 M, maybe go a little bigger. I don't know if I need it 3 M. That's good. And I could even make it lighter. I could use a different font, all kinds of stuff. I think even the paragraph inside there, I want a little bigger. I'll do banner P, the paragraph inside of banner. And I'll put my curly braces and I'll make font size. Maybe I'll put 2M, see what happens. Or actually, I've been using percents for those sizes, but let's see what 2M does. That's way too big because that's double of our 18 points. So it went to like 36. So we don't want it 2M. So we might want it like, let's see, if it is, the paragraph is at 110. Let's just try 130% and see if that works because it's at 110 of the default right now. And if we override that and say make 130 of the default, let's stick to there and see how that looks. That looks better. And we could even make the headline shorter. You could put a line break in there if you wanted to. If you wanted the line to break here at that facere, whatever that is, you could always put a BR tag, but I'll leave it like that. And I'll adjust the line spacing a little bit, and that would be line height. And I'll put 150% and just go from there, see what it looks like. And I don't know if it did anything. Line height 150%. Oh, I didn't want to do that on the banner. That's my mistake. It's going on the P. So now let's try that again. It's a little bit. I'll put a little bit more. You probably won't really notice it much. I'll refresh it. Probably won't notice it much unless you're kind of going with multiple lines here. You know, that looks okay. I think that's fine. Whatever it would say there. Button looks okay. And again, we could even put a shadow under the button. There's shadow properties we could put under the button if we wanted to. But I'll hold off on that for now. You'd be better off putting a border would do the same thing too. You could put some kind of dark orange border on there if you didn't like what was going on there. Or even a white border might look nice. Actually, I might do that now. You know, as you're doing stuff, you can kind of go in here and say, I like that welcome button. Maybe it needs a border. And I have border none. But what if I did border... I'll put solid, I'll put white, and I'll put 2 picks. And I'll see what that looks like. Will that look good? Not bad. Actually, that doesn't look too bad. It doesn't stand out too much. Now they all have kind of borders on them. That's okay. Or drop shadow. We could try drop shadow later. But that looks okay. And I think what I'll do to finish off this video, before we dig into here a little bit, we'll dig into here a little bit and tweak it a little bit more. I'll just change the color down here. Maybe I'll borrow the same color. I had it orange because I didn't want it really to stand out. And it's nice to use similar colors. That creates kind of unity. So what I might do, now this is for footer. Now I don't think we did anything for footer yet. Background color, and I'll just put color. Now color will affect anything in it. So we can target the P, or, you know, that might be better. Let's just target the P. We're in footer here. Let's just target footer P, the P inside there, and put color, and see if there's a dark orange. And see how that looks, and then we can make it even darker. I'll refresh that. Not too bad. We could maybe go a little darker, but that doesn't need to really stand out, and it could even be smaller. We can even go to font size and make it smaller, and maybe make it 90%. Let's see what that looks like. That looks better. That looks nice. I think it might look nicer than what we're doing here, possibly. So I don't know if I really need this. I could probably turn this off. I could probably close this tab so I don't get confused between the two. But this is looking pretty good. I could have used gray too because I'm using a dark gray up here. I could use dark gray for the column headings. I may do some of that for the next video. So we could kind of tweak things a little bit more. But, you know, if you're going to borrow stuff, you know, maybe using the same gray color here might look nice. You know, using the same colors throughout will give it some unity. But that looks pretty good. Now, we haven't focused on responsiveness of what happens when it gets to here. Not that it's a big deal, but we want to have these columns stacked, and we want to eventually get to the point where we can have this as like a hamburger menu with some kind of drop down. But what we might do first is just break this down on a different line and just kind of remove the flex for now. That might be easier than trying to worry about all the JavaScript and stuff, because, you know, we don't want to have 11 different videos for this particular exercise that we're doing. We'd like to kind of get here and then maybe focus on something else. Focus on the JavaScript. Focus on Google Fonts if we want to change the fonts and use some Google fonts. Use some cool fonts instead of everything being, you know, Arial and Tahoma and basic system fonts. We might want to break outside of that and use some really cool fonts here and make this look nicer. That's where we want to get to. So, you know, it should start to be fun in a way once you get it set up and you get some of these errors taken care of. I think just the basic layout is the issue at first, but then you could play around with it and really kind of tweak it and make it look nice. And then it's really becoming web design. Then you could kind of design it and make it look nice. So I'm going to stop here for part 7. So for part 8, we're going to kind of work on this a little bit, make this look a little bit nicer in here, whether it's the spacing or the coloring, just a little bit so it looks nice. And then we'll start to get into the responsiveness on what happens once you get to this point. Once, you know, it could be to here and then maybe to here. We're going to basically drop these down to a single rows, so we can use the flex to adjust that, and we can use the flex to adjust that. So that may help us out. We could have a class called flex and no flex that we could apply to that. So when we have a media query. So that's kind of where we're going. But that's part 7. Hope you're having fun with the CSS in our Jumbotron exercise.